HOA sold my ranch. When I was away, the army reclaimed every house without warning. I was serving overseas, doing my duty. When I got the call, my ranch, my home, was sold, without my consent, without my knowledge. The HOA took it all, but it didn't end there. The army showed up, with orders to reclaim every single house in my neighborhood. But why? What happened while I was away? Who gave them the power to take everything from me? And what's the shocking twist that no one saw coming? Welcome to HOA Secrets Uncovered. I'm Mark, and today I'm going to take you through a story that'll make you question everything about those HOA power trips. I live in UK, and when I'm not telling these crazy stories, I'm just like you. Someone who's been through the absurdity of suburban life. Now, let's dive into this strange tale of betrayal, power, and revenge. I still remember the exact moment I got the call. It wasn't some regular phone call. It wasn't a call from a friend or family. It was from the one place I never thought I'd have to deal with while I was overseas, my HOA. They told me something that stopped my heart for a second. Your ranch, it's been sold. Sold? What do you mean sold? How could they just sell my property like that? I wasn't even there to defend myself. I had trusted that my home, my land, would be safe while I was serving my country. But that trust was shattered in an instant. The words hit me like a punch in the gut. I thought they were joking. I thought I heard wrong. But then the second part of the message came. The army has already been sent to reclaim every house in your neighborhood. Your property's no longer yours. My heart raced as the realization sank in. I was helpless. I was thousands of miles away fighting for my country and back home. Everything I had worked for, everything I cared but was being taken away by people I never even thought I'd need to worry about. And the worst part? The HOA didn't even give me a chance to fight for what was mine. They just sold it to the highest bidder, without asking me, without telling me, and without any mercy. But who gave them that kind of power? Who let them do this without a second thought? I had to know the truth, and I was determined to find out how far the HOA would go. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But this nightmare, it was real. I didn't have time to process what was happening. I needed to act fast. I had to figure out how to get my ranch back, how to make sure the army didn't just take everything I'd worked for, because this wasn't just about land. It was about control. And it wasn't just my property that was at risk. It was everyone's. I was thousands of miles away, fighting a war. But now, the real battle had started. A battle I never saw coming. So I did the only thing I could think of. I packed my bags, grabbed my phone, and made a plan to go back home. I didn't know what I would find when I got there. Would my house still be standing? Would the army really be there? Who was behind this, and why were they doing this to me? All I knew was that I had to get back home. But when I returned, the truth I uncovered was more twisted than I ever could have imagined. What would you do if you found out that your home was sold while you were away? Would you fight back, or just walk away? Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think I should have done something differently? What would you do in my shoes? I didn't know what I was expecting when I landed back home, but it sure wasn't what I saw. My ranch wasn't just gone. It had been wiped off the map. It was like the place never even existed. I stood there at the edge of what used to be my property, staring at the empty land where my home once stood, my heart sinking with every breath. The house, the garden, the barn where I'd spent so many years building my life. Nothing was left. I walked up to the gate that used to mark the entrance to my place, but the gate was gone. In its place, a freshly built fence stretched across the land, clearly new, clearly part of some larger plan. My boots crunched on the gravel as I took a few hesitant steps forward. A sign on the new fence caught my eye. Under new ownership. New ownership. The words didn't make sense to me. Who had the right to do this? Who had the right to come in and just erase everything I worked for? The real kicker? There were no signs of life, no movers, no construction workers, nothing, just emptiness. My old house was replaced by a sleek, modern mansion that didn't belong here at all. It was like they built it overnight, from the ground up, without a second thought for the history that was erased. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, hoping for an answer, but all I got were dead ends. Every call to the HOA went straight to voicemail. Every attempt to reach someone, anyone, was met with silence. They'd vanished, disappeared into thin air, like they had all planned this, and now they were just waiting for me to be gone for good. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. So I decided to head to the HOA office, the heart of it all, the place where everything had started. It was about a 20-minute drive from my property, but at this point it felt like an eternity. The more I drove, the more questions I had. Who was behind this? Why had they sold my property? And how could the HOA just do this without even consulting me? Was the Army really involved? The thought kept creeping into my mind, but there had to be more to this story than I knew. Finally, I pulled up to the HOA office. It looked as boring as I remembered, plain, lifeless, and full of paperwork. But today, it seemed darker somehow, like something was off. The building was eerily quiet, not a soul in sight. I walked in, my boots echoing off the walls. Behind the front desk sat a woman I'd never seen before. She didn't look up when I walked in, her eyes glued to the computer screen in front of her. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to speak with someone about my property." She glanced up slowly, her face showing no emotion. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked flatly. "I don't need an appointment," I replied. "I'm the owner of the ranch you sold while I was overseas. I demand to speak to someone." Her expression didn't change. She stared at me for a moment, then slowly stood up and walked toward the back office. I could tell something was off. No one acted this cold, especially not when someone was coming in to complain about having their life stolen. She returned a few minutes later with an older man in a suit. He was the last person I expected to see. His suit was too nice for this place. Too out of place. He introduced himself as the HOA president, a man named Mr. Hayes. "Mr. Hayes," I said, trying to control my anger. "I'm here to understand why my ranch was sold without my consent." His eyes flicked over to the woman behind the desk, then back to me. He didn't seem surprised at all. In fact, he looked almost pleased. "Ah, yes," he said, his voice too calm for the situation. "I've been expecting you. You've probably already seen the new ownership sign on your property." I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing and the words wouldn't come out right. How did he know? What was going on here? He took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair. "I'm sure this is all a shock to you, but we've been working on this project for months. Your property was sold to a developer. The Army came in to ensure everything was done legally." I couldn't believe it. It was like he was talking about a routine business transaction, like my entire life had just been one big deal to them. "But I never gave you permission to sell my property," I said, my voice shaky. "How could you just take it from me?" His smile grew wider. "Oh, you didn't have to give us permission. You were in the service, remember? The HOA had the right to manage everything while you were away, and your property. Well, it was deemed unfit for the community." Unfit for the community? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This man was acting like it was all just a little paperwork shuffle, like it was just another day at the office. "And the Army?" I asked, my mind still trying to catch up. "They were simply enforcing the process. Mr. Hayes replied casually. "We needed their support to handle the transfer of ownership. Your absence made it all too easy." I could feel my fists clenching. Everything was slipping through my fingers, and I had no idea how to stop it. The army was involved. My property was gone, and now the army was part of the deal. I couldn't let this slide. I had to figure out who else was behind this, and I needed to do it fast. So I asked the question that had been gnawing at me. Who else is involved in this? Who made the final decision to sell my property? Mr. Hayes gave a small, knowing smile. "You'll find out soon enough. Everything is already in motion." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about a property sale. It was bigger than that. Someone wanted control, and they'd stop at nothing to get it. Who was really behind this? What did they stand to gain? And how far would they go to protect their interests? This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about something far more dangerous. What would you do if you found out that your HOA could sell your property without your permission? Would you just sit back and take it? Or would you fight for what's rightfully yours? I left the HOA office that day with more questions than answers. But there was one thing I was sure of. I wasn't going to let this go. The way Mr. Hayes spoke about everything, like it was just another routine transaction, like my home was just another property on a list, it made me sick. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something wasn't right. This wasn't just a simple real estate deal. It was a power play, and I wasn't going to be anyone's pawn. I spent the next few days digging deeper. I didn't know exactly where to start, but I had to find something, anything, that could give me a clue about who was behind this whole scheme. So I made a few calls, the kind of calls you don't make unless you're desperate. I reached out to old friends from the neighborhood, people who still lived nearby. Surely they'd have heard something about what was going on. At first, I got nothing. People were too scared to talk. Or maybe they were too used to the HOA's rules, their power. But one person, just one, finally broke. Her name was Carla, and she'd lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone else. Her house was the one everyone envied, the perfect home with the perfect lawn and the perfect white picket fence. She had always been the HOA's biggest supporter, always on the board at one point or another. So, when she spoke, people listened. "I don't know everything," she said, her voice trembling, "but I do know something about what's been happening." I leaned in, my heart racing. "Tell me," I said. "Tell me everything you know." Carla glanced around, like she was afraid someone might be listening. Then, in a hushed tone, she told me about a meeting that had happened while I was overseas. It was a secret meeting, one that wasn't recorded, one that no one knew about. "The HOA was under pressure," she said, glancing nervously at the windows. "There were some powerful people involved, people who wanted more than just a nice neighborhood. They wanted control. They wanted to reshape everything. And they were willing to do anything to get it." My stomach sank as I listened to her. Who were these people? What did they want from my property, from my home? Carla's words echoed in my mind, louder and louder as the pieces began to fit together in a way I hadn't expected. "They're not just after your land," Carla continued. "It's bigger than that. They're trying to buy up everything in the area. New development, new investments. The army is just a tool in their plan. They wanted to clear out the old homes to make room for what's coming next." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The army wasn't just enforcing some HOA decision. They were working together. And it wasn't just about one neighborhood. It was about changing the entire landscape of the area. Real estate developers were behind it all, using the HOA as their cover. Carla's face turned pale. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she whispered. "They'll come for me next. But I had to warn you. There's more happening here than you realize, and you need to stop them before it's too late." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. This wasn't just about my house anymore. It was about a whole network of people working in the shadows, pulling the strings, and using the HOA as their front. I left Carla's house that afternoon with a heavy heart. She had given me the truth, but it was a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. This wasn't just a personal attack. It was a well-coordinated plan. The people behind this had power, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. As I drove back to my property, the weight of everything that had happened so far started to sink in. The army was involved. The HOA had sold my ranch without my consent, and now real estate developers were trying to take over the entire neighborhood. I wasn't just fighting for my home anymore. I was fighting for the future of the entire community. But there was one thing I didn't know yet. Who exactly were these developers? Who was pulling the strings from behind the scenes? I had to find out. I had to know who I was up against. And more importantly, I had to figure out how to stop them before they could ruin everything. I spent the next few days scouring public records, looking for any hint, any lead that could point me toward these mysterious developers. Finally, I found something. A name. A name I recognized from the list of donors who had been involved with the HOA for years. Someone who had been pushing the HOA to make changes to the neighborhood. A businessman named Gregory Wells. I had heard of him before, but I never thought he'd be connected to something like this. He was a wealthy developer who had been involved in multiple projects across the country, all of them involving land use and zoning changes. But now, it seemed, he was using his influence to grab up property in my neighborhood, and the HOA was his tool. What was Gregory Wells really after? Why was he willing to go this far to get what he wanted? I needed to find out more. So, I decided to take a risk. I showed up at one of his business meetings. It was a private event, but I figured if I could get in and hear what was going on, I might be able to learn something valuable. I was nervous, but I had no choice. I couldn't just sit back and let them take everything from me. Not my home, not my neighborhood, and certainly not my future. I walked into the meeting room, trying to keep my cool. But as soon as I saw Gregory Wells standing at the front, speaking to a room full of high-powered people, something clicked inside me. I knew I was getting closer. But was I really ready to take on someone like him? Someone who had so much power and control? What would you do if you found out that the person behind your HOA's decisions was also trying to take control of everything you hold dear? I sat there, in the back of that crowded room, watching Gregory Wells speak. His voice was smooth, almost rehearsed. He spoke with the kind of confidence only a man who knew he was untouchable could have. The kind of confidence that comes from knowing you have the power to reshape entire neighborhoods, entire communities, just by signing a few papers. I was about to hear the truth, the kind of truth no one was supposed to know, but I didn't expect the next words to hit me as hard as they did. "I'm telling you, this project is going to change everything," Wells said to the room full of investors. "We're going to transform these old, outdated neighborhoods into something new, something modern, something the market actually wants. We've already made agreements with the HOA to start acquiring properties. The Army's been very cooperative. They've already cleared out a lot of the old homes, and soon we'll have a whole new community to build on." The words hung in the air like a thick fog. It wasn't just about my property. It was about a full-scale development, a complete overhaul of everything in the area. They had already planned it all. The more I listened, the more I realized just how deep this went. They weren't just after my ranch. They were after everything, every piece of land in the neighborhood, every last inch. And the HOA? They were nothing but a pawn in this game, a way for Wells to get what he wanted without anyone ever questioning him. But here's the part that made my stomach turn. As Wells continued talking about the beautification of the neighborhood, about the new future they were going to create, I realized something even darker. It wasn't just the land they wanted. It was the people. They wanted to push out the old residents, the ones who had lived here for decades. People like Carla, people like me, the ones who didn't fit their vision of what a perfect community should look like. Wells wasn't talking about building homes for people. He was talking about creating an exclusive, high-end neighborhood where only the rich could afford to live, the ones who could pay for his new future. I had heard enough. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor, making everyone in the room stop and stare. I had to make my move. I couldn't sit by any longer, pretending like I didn't care. "Gregory Wells," I shouted, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "What the hell is going on here? You can't just take people's homes and call it progress. This isn't about making a better community. It's about making money for yourself." The room went still, the eyes of every person in the room now fixed on me. Wells' face twisted into a smile, but it was the kind of smile someone gives when they know they've already won. He didn't even flinch at my outburst. Instead, he calmly stepped toward me. "You're wrong," he said, his voice calm, controlled. "This is about the future. People like you and me, we don't think the same way. We don't have the luxury of sticking to the past, of holding on to things that no longer work. What you're fighting for, it's gone. This is the way things are now." His words made my blood boil. He wasn't just taking my land, my home. He was insulting everything I had worked for. The blood, sweat, and tears I had poured into that place didn't matter to him. It was just another deal, just another property on a map. But that's when it happened. The real turning point. The one thing that changed everything for me. Wells motioned to a man standing by the door, who walked up to me, holding something in his hands. It was a piece of paper. "Take a look at this," Wells said, his grin widening. "This is the final offer. If you sign it, you'll get a payout. A fair one. It's a deal that benefits both of us. The HOA is on board. We've got the Army backing us. This is the way forward. There's no going back." I stared at the paper. It was an offer to sell my property. A final settlement, he called it. They were offering me a fraction of what my ranch was worth. And in exchange, they would make sure I walked away clean. No more hassle. No more fighting. But as I looked at that paper, a burning question formed in my mind. How could they think I'd just give up? This wasn't just a piece of land they were offering me. It was my home, my entire life. The memories, the blood, the sweat. It all meant something. "No," I said finally. "I won't sign. You don't get to just take what's mine and call it a deal. You can't buy me off like this. I'm not walking away." Wells' smile faded, replaced by a look of frustration. He didn't like being challenged, not when he had already done the hard part, making sure the neighborhood was ripe for the picking. "Suit you, or self," he said coldly. "But don't say I didn't warn you. This is bigger than you think. You're in over your head." And just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with the paper in my hand, the weight of his words hanging in the air. I wasn't sure what I was up against anymore. I knew I was in a fight that was bigger than me. But I also knew I couldn't give up. I couldn't let him win. I didn't know where this road would take me, but I wasn't about to back down. I'd come this far, and I was going to see it through. But as I stood there, holding the paper, I realized something. How far was I willing to go to stop Gregory Wells and his plans? Was I ready to lose everything to protect what was mine? What would you do in my shoes? Would you take the payout? Or would you keep fighting for your home, no matter the cost? I couldn't stop thinking about the offer Gregory Wells made. The paper in my hand was heavy with everything he had promised. Money, freedom, no more fighting. It was tempting, too tempting. A part of me could already imagine what life would be like without the endless battle, but the other part of me, the part that had worked every day to build my life, refused to back down. I had to know who else was involved in this. I needed to find out exactly how deep this conspiracy went. Gregory Wells wasn't some lone wolf in this. He had powerful allies, people who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. And I wasn't about to let them get away with it. The next few days, I dug into the records. I pulled up public documents, old meeting notes, even HOA financial statements. At first, it felt like a waste of time, pages and pages of nothing. But then something caught my eye. A name that kept popping up in every document, every meeting. Edward Carlton. It wasn't a name I recognized, but it was everywhere, and not just in HOA documents. Edward Carlton was tied to several real estate developments across the country, all of them massive projects, all of them backed by money that didn't add up. It was clear that he wasn't just a developer, he was the puppet master. Gregory Wells was just the front man. I couldn't believe I hadn't seen it before. This was bigger than I imagined. It wasn't just about some small-town HOA and a few wealthy developers trying to gentrify the area. It was about a network of powerful people who were systematically taking over neighborhoods, flipping properties, and making millions. And they were using the HOA as a tool. I knew I had to confront this head-on. I wasn't going to sit back and let them take over my home, my neighborhood. But how could I fight against a man with so many resources? A man who had the army in his back pocket? I was just one person, and I was already feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. The only way I could fight this was by going straight to the top. But I had to be careful. I couldn't just walk up to Carlton's office and demand answers. He wasn't someone who would take kindly to being questioned, not when so much money was on the line. I had to find a way to get to him, to get inside his world and figure out how to expose him. The thought of taking him down gave me a strange sense of power, but the reality was terrifying. So I made a plan. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was the only one I had. I would use Gregory Wells. I would get close to him, pretend to play along with the deal, and then use whatever I could to bring him and Carlton down. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was the only shot I had left. I reached out to Wells' office, asking to meet with him again. I told them I had changed my mind, that I was ready to negotiate. It wasn't the truth, but I needed to get back into his orbit. When I showed up at the meeting, Wells looked surprised. "I didn't think you'd come back," he said, his smile almost smug. "I'm here to talk business," I said, holding my ground. "I've thought about your offer, and I'm willing to hear you out. But I need to know exactly what's going to happen with my property. I can't just take your word for it." Wells chuckled. "Of course, you want details. Fine. We're ready to make a deal. You get paid, and you walk away. The HOA is ready to finalize everything. There's nothing for you to worry about. It's all taken care of." But something in his eyes didn't sit right. It was like he was hiding something. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I could sense it. "What about the Army?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Why are they involved?" Wells' smile faltered for just a second. It was enough for me to notice. "The Army's just helping with logistics," he said quickly. "Nothing to worry about. It's all legal. Everything's been done by the book." I wasn't buying it. The conversation drifted into small talk after that, but I was already thinking ahead. I had to get more information. I had to find out what Wells wasn't telling me, and I had to do it before it was too late. When the meeting ended, I walked out with a promise to think it over, but my mind was already racing. I had one more move to make. I tracked down someone who might know more, someone who had worked directly with Edward Carlton. His name was Luke, and he used to be an accountant for Carlton's. Development projects. I managed to track him down at a bar one evening, and after a few drinks, I got him talking. "Carlton's a snake," Luke said, shaking his head. "I don't even know how he gets away with half the stuff he does. He's got people everywhere pulling strings, making deals, buying off anyone who stands in his way. The HOA? They're just his latest tool. And Wells? He's just the face of the operation. Carlton's the one who makes the real decisions." My heart sank. I had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made it even worse. Edward Carlton was the mastermind behind it all. But the most shocking part? Luke told me something I didn't expect. "There's a loophole in all of this," Luke said, his voice lowering to a whisper. "A way to stop Carlton's plans before they get any further. But it's risky, and if you fail, well, you'll be in deeper trouble than you are now." A loophole? That was exactly what I needed. But the question was I ready to risk everything to stop them? I had come this far, but I knew the stakes were higher than ever. If I failed now, I'd lose everything, my property, my neighborhood, and maybe even my freedom. What would you do if you had the chance to stop a corrupt empire from taking everything you loved? Would you take the risk, knowing the cost? Or would you walk away before it was too late? The air in the room felt heavier with every word Luke said. The idea of taking on Carlton's entire operation seemed almost impossible, but the loophole he mentioned was the only chance I had left. I wasn't sure how far I was willing to go, but at that moment, I knew that if I didn't act now, I would lose everything. "Tell me about this loophole," I demanded, my voice steady but with a sense of urgency I couldn't hide. "How can I stop Carlton?" Luke took another drink, his eyes darting around the bar, almost as if he was worried someone might. "I'd overhear. It's risky, like I said. The key is in the HOA's own rules, the very same ones they've been using to strip people of their properties. But if you can expose a major violation, a loophole that they can't ignore, the whole thing falls apart. The HOA's power relies on their ability to follow their own bylaws, and if you can prove they've been breaking them, their entire plan crumbles." I leaned in, desperate for more details. "What violation? How do I find it?" Luke looked down at his drink, swirling it slowly. "It's all in the public records. There's a clause in the HOA's agreement with developers like Carlton that says they can't make major decisions or sell properties without a vote from the homeowners. It's a safeguard to prevent any one person or group from taking over a neighborhood. The thing is, they've been bypassing it for months, using the Army's involvement as a shield. If you can prove they didn't hold a proper vote for the sale of your property, or anyone else's, you've got them." I felt a spark of hope. This could work, but there was a catch. If I was going to find this violation, I needed to dig deeper into the HOA's records they never thought anyone would question. "Where do I find these records?" I asked. Luke gave me a knowing look, as if he had been waiting for this question all along. "The archives. The HOA keeps detailed records of everything. They're kept in a storage unit outside the office, hidden away so no one can find them. But I know someone who works there, someone who owes me a favor. If you're serious, I can get you in." I nodded, my mind already racing. The plan was taking shape, but there was a problem. Getting into that storage unit wouldn't be easy. It was locked up tight, guarded by people who had no problem doing Carlton's dirty work. I couldn't do it alone. The next few days were a blur. I made arrangements to meet with Luke's contact, a guy named Ricky, who worked as a janitor at the HOA office. Ricky wasn't exactly the type of guy who stuck his neck out for anyone, but Luke's favor was good enough to get him on my side. He told me he could help me get into the storage unit, but I had to promise him something in return. "I'm not asking for much," Ricky said, his voice low. "Just make sure I'm not left in the dust when all this comes out. I don't want any part of Carlton's mess. But I also don't want to be left behind when the truth gets out. Promise me that." I agreed, although I wasn't sure what Ricky thought I could do for him. But I didn't have a choice. I needed that access. The plan was set. I would meet Ricky at the HOA office after hours when everyone had gone home. We would slip in, find the records, and expose the truth. It was risky, but if I could get that one piece of evidence, the proof that the HOA violated its own rules, it would be over for Carlton and the whole corrupt system. When the night arrived, I was nervous but determined. I had come too far to back down now. I met Ricky in the parking lot, and together we snuck into the building. The office was silent, and the only sound was the soft click of our footsteps on the tile floor. We made our way to the back where the storage unit was kept. Ricky quickly went to work, picking the lock like he'd done it 1,000 times before. The door creaked open, revealing rows upon rows of boxes, old files, forgotten contracts, and dusty folders. It was a goldmine of information, the kind of stuff that could bring an empire like Carlton's crashing down. We started rifling through the files, one box at a time, looking for anything that could give us the leverage we needed. Hours passed, and I felt the weight of every minute ticking by. But then, as I flipped through, a folder marked Property Transfers, my hand froze. There it was, proof that the HOA had indeed sold my ranch without holding the required vote from the homeowners. The document was buried deep in a pile of other forms, but there it was, in black and white. The sale was made without the proper consent. I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it. I had the smoking gun. But as I looked at the document, I noticed something even more chilling. There was a second set of papers, hidden in the back of the folder. These were the ones I hadn't expected to find. They were dated just a few days before my ranch was sold, and they detailed a meeting between the HOA and Carlton's team, along with a list of compromises that were made, including a hefty payout to key board members. I couldn't believe my eyes. This wasn't just a violation of HOA rules. It was bribery, pure and simple. Wells and Carlton had paid off the board to push through their plan, no matter what it took. I stuffed the papers into my bag, my hands shaking with excitement. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I had the evidence to expose them all. But just as I turned to leave, I heard a noise, footsteps coming from the hallway. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't alone. Someone else was in the building. I couldn't get caught. Not now. Not when I was so close. I grabbed Ricky's arm and whispered, "We need to go. Now." We ran out of the storage unit, trying to move as quietly as possible, but the footsteps were getting closer. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. If we were caught now, everything would be over. We reached the door, and I slammed it open, practically pulling Ricky through it. We made it to the parking lot, breathless and wide-eyed, and I couldn't help but wonder, what if someone had seen us? What if they knew what we were up to? Would the evidence be enough to take down Wells and Carlton? Or was I in over my head? I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I raced toward the car. Ricky was already in the driver's seat, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the keys. We had just narrowly escaped being caught at the HOA office. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being watched. It was too close. Too risky. But I had the evidence now. The proof I needed to expose Gregory Wells, Edward Carlton, and the entire corrupt system behind them. We drove in silence, the weight of what I had just done sinking in with every mile. My mind was a whirlwind of questions. Was I really ready to go public with this? Could I trust the authorities, or would they be just as corrupt as the HOA? What if this was all a huge mistake, and I was walking right into their trap? But then the truth settled in. I wasn't just fighting for my property anymore. I was fighting for every person in that neighborhood who had been too scared to stand up. I was fighting for every homeowner who had lost their rights to these powerful people who thought they could control everything. This was bigger than me. I told Ricky to pull over near a diner we used to visit when I was a kid. It was quiet, familiar, and I needed to clear my head. We sat down at a booth in the corner, and I spread the documents out in front of us. The violation, the bribery, the sale of properties without consent. It was all right there in black and white. "You've got everything you need," Ricky said, his voice low. "Now what are you going to do with it?" I stared at the papers for a moment, feeling the weight of my next decision. This wasn't just about going to the press or showing up at a city council meeting. This was about taking down a powerful man who had orchestrated this entire scheme. I could go to the media, but would they even believe me? I had the proof, but it seemed like Wells and Carlton had their hands in everything. They owned people. They controlled the flow of information. Was I risking my life just by speaking out? I could take it to the authorities, but what if they were on their side? What if the corruption reached all the way up to the people who were supposed to protect us? But then, I remembered what Carla had told me about the powerful people behind the HOA, and how the truth needed to come out. The more I thought about it, the more I realized there was only one real option left. I needed to go public. I made the call. I reached out to a journalist I knew, someone who had always been interested in uncovering the truth about shady dealings in our town. I sent them the documents, all the evidence I had gathered, and I explained everything. I was risking it all, but I couldn't let this go on any longer. The next day, the story hit the news. It was everywhere. The bribery, the illegal sales, the involvement of the army. The HOA was exposed for what it really was. A front for real estate developers who had been working in the shadows for years, taking advantage of people and their homes. But the fallout was even bigger than I could have imagined. The authorities moved quickly, launching investigations into the HOA and its dealings with Carlton's company. Wells was forced to step down as president, and several of the board members were arrested. It was a victory for the homeowners, but the war wasn't over yet. The most surprising part, the Army's involvement was brought to light too. It turned out that they had been unknowingly used by the developers to push through the property sales. A few high-ranking officers were implicated, and the investigation spread further than anyone had expected. I watched it all unfold on the news, feeling a sense of relief I hadn't known I needed. But then, as I sat there in my living room, staring at the television screen, I couldn't help but wonder, how many other communities had been taken over by people like Wells and Carlton? How many others had their homes stolen without even knowing it? I thought about the future. I thought about the people who would come after me, the ones who would fight to protect their homes and their rights. The fight wasn't just about me anymore. It was about making sure something like this could never happen again. But even after all of this, one question still haunted me. How many others were out there who had no idea their HOA was secretly working for someone else? How many other neighborhoods were controlled by people like Wells, hiding behind bylaws and regulations, making decisions that affected entire communities? Would they be as lucky as I was, or would they be too late? What do you think? Do you think the fight is over, or is there more to uncover?